28 degrees in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily, your daily dose of sunshine. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf.
It's not looking very good this morning, going by what the temperature is saying. The Google says it's excessive heat, 33 degrees in Lagos. And it's particularly, Maokpe, at a time when, you want to, a 20-minute ride took me to about an hour this morning, 45 minutes to 1 hour this morning because of a broken down vehicle on Kara Bridge. Eventually taken out of the road, but hey, there are so many people who must have been caught in the crossfires of the road. Amaya Makine, good morning and welcome to the show.
Oh, Aya, do not let the cool mornings in Abuja, fool you. It gets up to a sweltering 34 to 36 degrees, much later, even sometimes 38 degrees. Well, this morning, we're taking you to Kano State, which gets even hotter than the Federal Capital Territory, to an infrastructure that was built about 2 years ago, the Kano Bridge. Very interesting three-layer bridge, which is right smack in the middle of the city. Quite a piece of infrastructure to look at, because you have like a top level, you have a middle level, then you also have an underpass. Quite a fascinating piece of infrastructure, which we hope continues to be very well maintained for the people of Kano State. Ayo.
The first time we brought this to our viewers, I was enthralled by the fact that something as massive, iconic, and lovely as this is in Kano. So again, I remind anyone who is saying, Kano is just some rural area or any northern city is just there. No. This is the second of two such infrastructure in the north. I think the other one is in Yobe State. So this is definitely something, not just for sore eyes, but believe me, it's an infrastructure that I believe that the people themselves are enjoying. And I love what you said back there, Mark, when talking about whether or not we'll be able to maintain it. We have to maintain it over the years and over the decades. Let every infrastructure that we bring to our people have embedded in it a system of sustaining the infrastructure, of maintaining the infrastructure. So at least we'll be able to say, okay, this is ours. So this is the lower level, the lowest of the three levels, and that bike man is going right under it. So yeah, something that you can just enjoy and know that Nigeria has its greatness in its people.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the view right under the underpass. Well, I do hope, though, that, as I did highlight, that the state government continues to maintain that particular piece of infrastructure for the use of the citizens. All of that sand you see by the side of the road, I'm hoping that, on a daily basis, they are beginning to find ways to clear the sand so that it doesn't overtake the bridge. But the way every state is working on one piece of infrastructure or more by which you can identify their states. You see a piece of infrastructure or you see a particular type and you know straight away, oh, this is Kano, oh, this is Lagos, oh, this is Abeokuta, oh, this is... That should continue so that, we can have many more highlights for our movies. But at this point, we'll take a break and we'll be back shortly to discuss the matters that we have for the day. Still bordering very much around our democracy. It's countdown now to May 29 when, well, we've moved Democracy Day to June 12, but then the administration will be asking itself questions as to how they fared 2 years after they were elected. So just stay tuned with us and we'll be back shortly. The discussion continues with Professor Udenta Udenta, who is a founding National Secretary, Alliance for Democracy. Again, that word, democracy. And he's also a distinguished fellow of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Professor, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Early this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you this morning,
Democracy all over the place.
All over the place, democracy.
And yet, not enough to share.
Not enough democracy to share for the people. Absolutely, you're right.
What is going on? I mean, because when people had, I see that book, How Democracies Died. It was one of the books that I think Bishop Coker recommended at that particular event.
I'm going to recommend it too.
Oh, interesting.
It's an interesting book.
So
it speaks to the moment.
Are we witnessing? Well, since I don't want to believe so, I mean, I want to think that, because there were different layers to this discussion. Those who talked about the base of democracy, because if we accept that it's a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, it means that the people are very important in this.
Absolutely.
And getting the right results from the onset, results that everybody accepts, results that everyone can say, well, yes, my candidate won fair and square, and my candidate lost fair and square, are very important.
Absolutely.
And then when the process of governance now starts, we now have to see that the three arms of government, the executive, legislature, and judiciary, are working as they ought to. These are the different intricate layers. And it would seem that, when you now break it down, different areas of, not just of the world, who say they practice democracy, seem to have challenges at different levels. Where is our own challenge currently?
Democracy is not just a system of government or a method of managing human and material resources. Democracy is conversation, is dialogue. And there are two key features. Legal foundation of democracy and legitimate expression of that legality. What does that mean? You go through an electoral process and people get elected. They are sworn in on the basis of the constitutional text. That is legal. Legitimacy now derives from transforming the norms of that legality to impact positively on the lives of the people. That is governance. So it may be a legal government, but an illegitimate government. That level of illegitimacy, because there's poverty in the land, there is hunger everywhere, inflation is soaring, criminalities and terrorism and all manners of insecurities pervade the nation. And the government is apparently bemused, like this current one. That means you could be legal because you are properly constituted, but it is illegitimate because you have lost the followership of the people. That is when democracy breaks down. The breakdown of democracy begins to occur. That's what they found at that colloquium a few days ago. The breakdown of democracy means when you abandon the foundational norms of democracy and they begin to use instruments you have acquired in power to dismantle the guardrails that govern the democratic system. That is why How Democracies Die is an important book. It is not by firing a shot these days that democracy crumbles or dies, in the words of Obasanjo. It is by leveraging on those things that saw you to power. For example, what are the guardrails? The Constitution. What do you do with the Constitution? The matter in Rivers State, for example, is almost sub judice now because the PDP governors have got the cut. So we have to navigate carefully the boundaries of the conversation. But the abutment of democratic rule, and you find a sort of administrator strutting around Port Harcourt down, dismantling democratic infrastructure. It is not just taking a governor down, a parliament down. He's coming to implode the place, dissolve, of course, the cabinet, reconstituting the local government, he's appointing people. So he's creating almost a condition of finality. And you ask yourself, Mokbe, will he be invited to the South-South Governors Forum? Or will Bala Mohammed or PDP to extend invitation to him to attend the PDP Governors meeting? How does it start?
On Sunday, we saw that...
So if you find that their sense is that if you take democracy as a package, and then you abort a significant chunk of it and reconstitute it, that regime has become a hybrid regime. And hybrid regime is a term that is part of the structure of competitive authoritarianism. When, as in the forum you are part of, you find that the guardrails of democratic governance are shrinking. Look at the liberal space. Look at the media. Look at civil society. Look at labor. Look at the parties.
Yeah, so
if there's a direct, vigorous intemperate energy being deployed to manacle the spirit of the nation and then abort democratic institutions at all levels. The democracy is suffering. Democracy is dying. So it's not like a theoretical formulation. It's a practical thing we see every day. But it's incremental. So people don't see it. They see parliament that is in force. They see judiciary that is functioning. But you don't look at the content of the parliament. That, for example, you must do something in a specific way and it's done in another way. You must affirm something for the proclamation in a specific constitutionally provided way. But he didn't do it. But there's parliament that did it. Or secondly, that a woman, a senator, said, I am harassed. That is allegation. It's not even proved. Start a process of recall immediately. And it's being facilitated. But it's still done within the ambits of the law, in quote. That is brain of democracy. Or a governor, Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State, because he's reviving PDP with the board of trustees and so on there, chasing away those they call the undertakers in the party and the quislings. Suddenly the EFCC is persecuting the state. So, because the EFCC is the legal institution, he can't say he shouldn't do his job. But you are now leveraging on those elements, institutional elements. You find in the system that should protect democracy and democratic governance. You're weaponizing them. The judiciary, in the coercive authorities of the state, if a journalist speaks out of turn, they knock on the door. If you come to a certain program and you're not strong enough, like I'm strong enough, they tell you, hello, you shouldn't be saying what they're saying. If you call an IG of police, a local IG of police, it's your right in law, in the Constitution to do so. They knock on your door. That is criminal cyber stalking. These are things which you find in the system of governance, but you are distorting, diluting, and transmogrifying them in a way and manner that is shortening that democratic conversation. That is what we find as the legacy of the Bola Tinubu presidency at this critical stage of our evolution as a nation.
I think it's important to say that, the conversation generally bordered on democracy across Africa. Yes, much as people are, they certainly will zero in on their own experience.
Absolutely, that's what it should
but,
be.
you made a very interesting point about legality and legitimacy. And you spoke about how when hardships increase, that could make a government look like it's illegitimate, despite the legality, fulfilling the legal processes through which it came to power.
But do you know the Arab Spring?
Yes, I was just about to go there, because we don't even have to go that far.
Okay.
We see, just right in, our neighboring countries, what transpired, Burkina Faso, Mali, when they experienced the schools. We saw initially that the people were full of joy, and every now and again you get to see, things that they say the new military commander in Burkina Faso
let me
is
come
doing.
in there, but
Yeah.
That's a note of caution. Democracy in its unalloyed form, in the form in which it approximates the sensibilities, the interests and needs of the people, remains the best form of government. Nobody is interested in the quick fix method of military regimes or calling on democratic backsliding as a pathway to African revival or renaissance. Understood?
Yes, so yes. That's the question I wanted to ask, because interestingly, just yesterday, Mr. Osita Chidoka was on this program, and he talked about how in the last 1 year or so, there have been significant improvement in many aspects of governance. He talked about how, prices were coming down, the dollar has stabilized, blah, blah, blah. But he said that, what has happened in Rivers and a number of other places has the potential to derail, to roll back some of the gains. So there'll be questions to be asked as to, if a government inherits, an inherently difficult state of the economy and has to take very painful decisions for the people, for us to be able to get out of there. Because let's not make let's make no mistake. What a lot of Nigerians are currently going through, are severe hardships that they haven't seen perhaps since the military era. So I want to know, at what point do we say that this is what is necessary? This is something that we must go through to come out of prosperous on the other side. At what point do we begin to say that?
It's important to say planning for democratic governance is very key. And I won't be tired of stressing it. President Bola Tinubu came to office May 29. There was apparently no plan. There was no government. Buhari had left but left in such a way that the regime of subsidy could have persisted for at least a month or two after the swearing in. And the new parliament could have even extended it legally for more consultations. For even the adjudicatory process of that election to have been concluded by the Supreme Court. But it could stop the Presidential Commission appointed by the president to come together to say, we have these deep challenges you're talking about. We can't manage the economy anymore. But on the day of the swearing, he says subsidy is gone. Without a government in place, without even the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Government of Federation, without even the Chief of Staff, without the cabinet. That is, for me, not only irrational and illogical, situational and episodic and incoherent. And followed up quickly with flotation of the naira. We don't even have the benchmark to say this is the policy framework. For 2 years, virtually 2 years, we have been plunged into this disaster because of thoughtless presidential proclamations, which you don't find anywhere in a very vigorous and rigorous policy document, backing like a mixed document, but in a part document, where you can reference on where you're sitting and say, I have pages this is the program. There's no program. So even if the people are suffering and you need to aggressively address it, like saying you need a mad medicine to cure a madman, that medicine must have its material properties well worked out, chemical composition, side effects. We don't have it. That is why people are still, as you have pointed out, suffering at every level: transportation, feeding, medical, supplies, hospital bills, drugs. So my great friend Chidok, I don't know the science is saying or the data is reading, there's nothing coming down. The foodstuffs prices are not coming down. Hospital bills are not coming down. I have been sick for 3-4 days. I know what I'm going through to take care of myself. The idea is that the government, you will always meet challenges. But when the challenges appear so overwhelming, you cannot begin to dismantle democratic governance incrementally in order to solve the problem. Neither can you overwhelm the people, with intemperate energy and force, which is what this government is currently doing. That is why you find assemblage of African stars, the Bishop Kuka, President Obasanjo and the rest of the gathering talking about democracy dying. It is not a theoretical statement. It's a practical manifestation of where we are today. And when you turn around, Mugban said, what has happened in Rivers? We can't predict what the outcome will be. But we can say here on this table that you remember the name of Adetokunbo Ademola. Remember Louis Mbanefo. You remember Dadi Onyama. Remember Showe Mimo. Remember, Mama Nasir. Remember Josiani Agolo. Remember Irikive. Remember Baseki. Remember Oputa. The list goes on and on. Yeah. You ask yourself, this current Supreme Court, where do they stand in the galaxy of these stars, in this pantheon of judicial icons and immortals? The case before them will either lead into the infamy, hall of infamy, where do they down, or where they can take their pride of place with these great names I've mentioned. Because the matter of Rivers, which we're not going to discuss in terms of its legal composition or content, is one of the clearest indicators yet that a hybrid regime has loosened the guardrails of democracy, unfettered itself, and is prepared to say, Benue, we're not ready for this. We are not yet there. Oshun, no, give it Oshun. Oh, Adamawa, are you sure he's not ready for it? He cannot begin to pick and choose how you dismember democracy and reconstitute it with a sole administrator who is shutting down governance space.
I think it's very important for me to just say very clearly what Mr. Chidok has said, because apparently he also wrote it down in a post of his on X, and I think he was trying to make the point. The title of the post was President Tinubu's Own Goal, a tale of the lizard who ruined his mother's funeral by his own hand. That was the title of his post. And when he was talking about key indicators that were beginning to show that Nigeria was turning the corner economically, he was pointing to foreign portfolio investments, which were on the rise, Naira stabilizing, food prices beginning to correct, showing evidence in major markets, rice, beans, and tomatoes falling by 15 to 20%, external reserves strengthening. These are some of the things that he pointed to, but he was saying that the president took a wrong turn at his finest moment. Nigeria stands at the precipice of self-inflicted crisis. That was the point he was making.
Okay, well, actually, like I said, I wasn't witness to that and I didn't watch that show, but the point I'm making is very clear, that even if you try to be as differential as possible, with these figures and numbers. You know.
You think you're being differential?
Yes, because being differential, because I have bought drugs in the past 2-3 months. I have comorbidities, something I can say on air. I have high blood pressure and hypertension, and I have sugar issues. These are not things which you hide. I know what the drugs cost me across board. My wife actually has to stock drugs every time, and she buys foodstuffs in quantity. She buys from markets. I don't the market other people are talking about. I don't see that drop. And what is called portfolio investment, what does that mean? Portfolio investment simply means portfolio investment. The climate may not be as cloudy as it was 2, 3, 4 months ago, but we have not come out of the woods even in that regard. We have not come out in any single particular material, significant element. And then, like he brilliantly pointed out too, to compound delicate, slow-paced sort of recovery, which are imperceptible even for the people. Because sometimes these numbers don't reflect the material condition of the people.
That's true.
And then suddenly you now, because, okay, take MBS. The statistics bound. Oh, inflation dropped by 2. Oh, it dropped by 4, dropped by 5. This is a number juggling. Because you ask the woman who sells pure water or her Booker food, how her life is treating her. You have a young student or copper, how much do you spend on Uber, on board? It hasn't dropped. The quality of life has not depreciated to the level of people being animalized and imbecilized.
I know that Ayo
Under this government.
I know that Ayo has questions for you, Prof. Let's go to Lagos.
Thank you, Mark. Prof, you know, there are those who would point to you straight away that these issues are not new. As a matter of fact, it was in 1983, I think, that the government of the day in the Second Republic declared what they called austerity measures. And despite all of that effort within those, following the first 4-year term of the Shagari government, they tried these austerity measures, hoping that it would at least ameliorate some of what, do one thing or the other to the people. Since that time until now, it has only gotten worse. And it would seem like the trajectory has been, it's been difficult to arrest that trajectory. Do you think we've been able to learn from history in our electioneering, in our democracy? Because, as you would also agree, several people will point out that some of the issues we're dealing with, they're unfortunately not new to us. And it would seem like we just allowed them willy-nilly.
Okay. Your last time I was here, I guess you were in Lagos too, and Mugbe was sitting with me, and the leader of the Business movement, was sitting here. And this kind of question even came up, and I said, okay, at the turn of the century, what we call now the African century, there was an OAU, bettered in 1963. But the visionary leaders of the moment, 1999-2000, said, these things seem to have outlived its usefulness. We need to recalibrate it to suit the new historical age. President Obasanjo of Nigeria, with the flicker of Algeria, and then Mbeki of South Africa, put their heads together, summoned the other leaders of the continent, and they repackaged it as AU, African Union, much more mobile, much more content-driven, much more programmatic and development-based. 3 or 4 things stood out. I'm answering your question, Ayo. 3 or 4 things stood out. African peer review mechanism, where the leaders will subject themselves to periodic texts on benchmarks and measurable indices to say, how are you performing across board in Africa? Corruption, governance, development, and so on. 2, NEPAD, the new Partnership for African Development, which is sure to still be alive in Nigeria today, but you and I should know whether it is breathing, whether it is crawling, whether it is actually in a comatose state. What is that? The Millennium African Program, MAP, and the Omega Plan, which the Western world repackaged through Japan, blended to form NEPAD, partnerships between Africa and the world, then within African states, and then between the public sector and the private sector. Obasanjo domesticated it. It's from NEPAD now, we now grew out NEEDS document, National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy. At the state level, the SEEDS document. At the local level, the LEADS document. With Soludo there and as Governor Central, Chief Advisor to the President on Economy, being the driver of that project. You have a document before you, you can turn pages and say, this is how you build development in a democracy. This is the content of the global war then was under the MDGs. Millennium Development, not SDGs now, the MDGs then, from the global to the continental and part to the needs. I ask you, what document do we have before us today, since Bola Ahmed Tinubu became president, that is guiding our trajectory? I use 3 terms: episodic, situational, and incoherent. On one branch, its subsidy is gone. The other side is flotation, tariffs, and taxes, and now possibly dismantling democratic infrastructure with the hyper being reversed. You don't find any coordinate lines between all things.
But
So
Prof,
that is why, as 1983 you talked about, we had the challenges then. Obasanjo at least tried to put together a package that is very well thought out. It may not be the best, it may not be without flaws, but something you can work with. We need hope. In what direction? 3 planks: anti-corruption, security, and economy. Now this
you know, there are those who would also remind you, Prof,
studio,
just 1 second.
I said in this studio, Ayo, that 2 years will be the maximum this government will have. Without distraction, already you can see the destruction. We've moved to another topic of coalition building. 2027, it is swinging in. And what is swinging in, the government will respond in a radical manner in order to prepare for re-election. That means governance will slow down.
But Prof, at the end of the day, just 1 second, Prof, because we're running out of time. At the end of the day, Prof, it boils down to the people. I've listened to some security operatives over the years say a city gets the kind of police it deserves. The same thing some would say a country gets the kind of politicians or governments that it deserves. So let's take it to the people. Because when we talk about democracy, most of the time we're talking about the political class, we're talking about democratic infrastructure. But the most sophisticated infrastructure of them should be the people. How well do you think we're doing in terms of making the people the bastion of democracy indeed, and not just a cannon fodders?
Okay, very correct. I think I get you there. I had a conversation with a major political leader, no point mentioning name. He said, let's look at what we call this democracy. And I've said it on the same studio here. 230 million Nigerians, presumably, something in between. 93 million registered voters. 20% thereabout of those registered voters who cast their vote in the last election. And the current president scored 37%, an F score of the 20% of the 93 million. That makes this government has no mandate, actually. But the Constitution permits a mandate. That means the first level of even inoculating democracy with this kind of aberration is to say, if you don't have the 50% voter turnout, I will find a way to do it. This election will not be legitimate. Because the implication is that 30,000 people can elect a president in a country of 230 million people. So the people are talking about are not even represented because they didn't even cast their vote. The persons who rule them maybe have a mandate of 12.
Just a second, Prof.
5% vote.
Just a second, Prof. So which is the problem, wouldn't you?
Democratic governance.
Yes.
I'm not saying that you don't have a government in place because the Constitution has said this is the way.
Well, Prof, just 1 second. On the point you made about the people, that is the problem, isn't it? That the people are not as sophisticated democratically or in terms of elections or even voter education and all of that as they should be. Can we then say,
because
just a second,
requirement because the people themselves, the people themselves in singularities cannot affect this kind of potent change. When they have
Prof,
just amendment to the Constitution.
Just a second,
This is the threshold for you to have an election.
Prof, just 1 second.
That election.
I'd like you to stick with
representational democracy.
Yeah.
It is important for you to fix it at the level of constitution making.
I need you to speak to our infrastructures around the people. Speak to the infrastructures around building a people that will sustain democracy. Because the politicians today, Prof, let's be real. At the end of the day, no matter what the system is, no matter what the policy is, no matter what the constitution is, no matter what the document is, it's still about the people. But if the people are not sophisticated enough to use those instruments that we have created, what then is the use? We've always complained about the fact that at the end of the day, no matter what it is, just a second, Prof, that no matter what the issue is, it all comes back down to implementation. And if the people who are supposed to implement it are not aware, are not educated, then what is the use? So how do we build that kind of people that can sustain democracy and make sure it doesn't die in Nigeria?
I get your point. Take the voting method, for example. Before 2015, you just go with your card and cast a vote. If you are not captured, you give incident form in which you fail, you vote. From there, we move to card reader. It's an improvement in the law. From the candidate to beavers, from beavers to IREV. People say complain with the IREV, but people will say, oh, if you throw your man back 10 years ago, it is a far better electoral process, a better environment we have, where you cannot have mutilated result, you don't have a voter speech, with cards, you turn everywhere. In the same way, if you have an amendment, I understand the power of civic space mobilization to convince those who make the law to say, the threshold for legitimate election is 50% voter turnout. One. Second, representational democracy means if a APC had 37%, it should have 37% of parliament. PDP, 26%, Labour, 24%. That is inclusive.
So you're recommending that as well?
It makes more sense in a liberal democratic space we have now to say, how can you have 37%, you're not shutting that democratic space everywhere? Yeah, it's a failure, it's an F.
Mr. Peter Obi also, made the same case.
That is actually when I talked about my conversation with the leader, a major important leader. That's Peter Obi.
Okay.
It's his viewpoint, and I think it's actually a global viewpoint. First past the goalpost is no longer workable. What works now is that this party has 37% in the last election. This one 27%, this one 26%. You combine even those with 5% threshold, they get into office. So in the parliament, you find a robust debate and conversation and contestation of ideas. And not this kind of caricature democracy you find with a parliament that has lost his head and the senior president that you don't get the rubber stamp whenever the president sends across for him to do.
Well, I know that the National Assembly will certainly have, a different
Oh, sure, they should. And I'm here to take them on that.
Let me bring you up. Let me quickly ask you this as we wrap up now. We understand that the tenure of the current INEC chair, because we talked about the different levels to this democracy and how the election process is extremely important to it. Just to also add quickly, because we're talking about 90 million people or so on the voters register, a few CSOs have come up to say that we need a more credible register. They are doubting that
the number actually is up to that, or more than that.
Exactly. So they want a clean voter
register. Rules is important.
But just, as we now understand that the tenure of the INEC chairman will be expiring in November, and it looks like there are already plans to start shopping for
somebody else.
Yeah, what is the criteria? Because there are those who say the president should not be, invested with the power to appoint a new chairman for INEC. They think that a different process should be involved in bringing up. What would you recommend?
It requires a servant leader.
Excuse me.
A servant leader who understands his place in history and legacy wants to leave.
The question is, who should appoint him?
I'm coming to that. Because you have the constitutional parameters now, which you cannot breach or distort, already in place. But if you have a servant leader, like Electoral, who said, I don't know whether this election that I won it really. Let us have a conversation about electoral reform. And he set up a panel to say, it was a difficult election for everybody. We don't want it to happen again after me. It was one that embraced the Niger militants. That's what he called forbearance. The current president, Balaji, will say, oh, Obasanjo appointed INEC chairman. Maybe Yar'Adua appointed, Jonathan appointed, maybe Buhari appointed. I was appointed my own. But the forbearance simply means, I've seen that it doesn't work. That doesn't make for inclusive democratic conversation. It doesn't make for so-called transparency, probity, and openness. They will always accuse the person they appointed as somebody who is going to be loyal to you. We defer to you, and we may fix the election for you. Jonathan went closer enough to say, I have never met President Jagai in my life. I don't even know him. But they say he's a good man and highly skilled and qualified. But sometimes the president would like to know who the person is. In law, if you can't amend the constitution now in order to deny the president that power, as it should be done, is the president himself will rise to the moral occasion to say, I have this power, but I can even orchestrate a constitutional amendment to say, I don't think I need this kind of power. But who will do it for the president with a clear moral contour and moral compass? The way this current government is going, the way they're shutting that democratic conversation, appointing some administrators, combining National Assembly to do whatever there, and possibly hiring the judiciary here and there. And they're terrorizing political parties and civil society and level. I don't know whether this government is the right one to do it.
Well, we'll see about that. It's certainly something that is certainly in the offing because, I mean, the tenure of the INEC chairman will be over and a new person must be appointed. Well, we have to thank you very much for your thoughts this morning, Professor Udenta Udenta, who is a distinguished fellow at the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, and also the founding National Secretary, Alliance for Democracy. Thank you once.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, we'll take a break, and we'll be back shortly with further discussions, this time with Laolu Akonde. Stay with us. Well, our conversation continues now with Mr. Laolu Akonde, who is a former presidential aide, with quite a number of things to look at that has transpired this week. I don't know which one of them you want to start with. I mean, of course, the conversation around democracy continues, you know, following from that colloquium that was hosted by the former governor of Imo State and also former deputy speaker of the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
And then at the National Assembly, there have been quite a number of developments. Yesterday, there was the voting on constitutional amendments, a number of bills passing second reading. Then we also saw 2 days ago, a shocking scene, the floor of the committee hearing, Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges. Of these three, let me ask you. You take your pick. Which one really stood out for you?
Well, I mean, I think that the most important thing for me is the kind of conduct that we are observing in the National Assembly, especially in the Senate. Now, of course, we know we have two houses in the National Assembly, you know, and they are both equal, you know, we will say. But people expect a certain level of gravitas and a higher expectation of proper conduct, especially among senators. But sadly, that has not been the case recently, especially because of this, you know, somebody called the Natasization of the Nigerian Senate. It's just, I mean, as a man, I'm just embarrassed that what ought to have been done in a very simple, decent way has turned into a serious mockery, you know, of that institution of the Senate. You know, so I am more concerned about what happens in National Assembly. I mean, look at what also happened last week after the president gave a proclamation about what he wanted to do in Rivers State, and the law says that it has to be approved, you know, within 48 hours if the National Assembly is sitting, you know, and the National Assembly, both houses came out and told us that, hey, well, look, we've approved it. But the Constitution says that there should be 2/3 people voting, or if, as a matter of fact, the Constitution says all members. Now, they didn't tell us, you know, that what the figures were. They just told us that they've approved it. But they need to tell us. They need to tell us and say that, okay.
I think it was only in the House of Reps, and even that, some people will still say it was wuru-wuru to the answer.
Yeah,
because there was a particular House of Reps member who kept on calling for a head count within the chambers of the House of Representatives. But when the vote was done through the voice vote, afterwards, the speaker said, for the records, let us just place on record that we have 243 members present today, I think, according to the attendance register. And some people said, look, our attendance register would not have been sufficient to prove that all of those members were there. And how do we know that everybody voted aye, you know, in that regard? Yeah. So there were still questions around it, but I think the speaker, you know, still tried to show that
a little bit of
that we're more than 2/3 who took this decision.
Okay,
but we didn't get that in the Senate.
You know, and that dovetails into the conversation about democracy. You know, so do these people understand what democracy is at all? You know, and it is heart-rending because the National Assembly, that's the people's parliament. That is where people come to vex. You know, that is where people see as this is our own platform. So we're talking about democracy. The law says 2/3 majority must support this, and you are not, you don't feel compelled because you have an obligation to tell us in both houses how many people we are sitting, how many people voted yes, how many people voted no, how many people abstained, and then who are these people that voted yes and voted no? These are the things that they owe us. But because they don't understand democracy, you see, they don't understand what
is it that they don't understand it or they choose to ignore it?
Well, you know,
because in the Senate, in fairness, there are quite a number of legislators there as well who also objected very strongly when they saw just how the process was going to go down. They took a walk.
Yeah, you know, I mean, people like Senator Serake Dixon and Senator Abaribe, and we must commend
and Senator Tambuwal as well.
And Senator Tambuwal. We must commend their boldness. But we need, as a people, as Nigerians, as citizens, we need to challenge this very, very seriously. Because you can't treat us that way. The president says, I have to do it. Look, I can't sit down here and people are messing up. Okay. But our laws, the totality of our laws has anticipated something like that. And so he says that, all right, President, you can do this far, and then the National Assembly, we have to check it. And so a lot of people were depending on the National Assembly. Look, the fact that we have a president asking a governor and the State Assembly to go and sit down is a big problem. It's huge. And I wish that even those senators themselves can understand. It means that anybody, you know, the president, and I'm not talking, it's not about President Bola Tinubu, although it's, you know, I'm worried that it is him that is making those calls. But this means that a president, any president, can ask anybody that is elected to be suspended. All you have to do is to create the circumstances. So for me, it is so fundamental. And we were hoping that the National Assembly can checkmate that kind of presidential assumption of powers that we know is not expressly stated in the Constitution.
So is it that
they failed.
Is it that they see the real need for it through their justification? I mean, imagine that there would have been a robust debate, and would have seen,
have seen it all
fireworks and all of that, and then we now see the vote at the end of the day.
And if the votes were actually what they were, that's it. We know that, okay, at least we are within the ambits of democracy. But these guys are not willing to tell us how many people were sitting in both houses. They are not willing to tell us how many people voted up. They are not willing to tell us how many people voted down. They are not willing to tell us who were the people that abstained. You know, and we are just supposed to accept that because you said it. You even held these sittings behind closed doors. You know, okay, fine. You maybe because there's some security information, you should have brought the debate out. Okay, you didn't. Now, you should tell us, and they should still tell us today, how many people voted in the House of Representatives, how many people voted up or down in the Senate, how many people voted up or down. We need the numbers. We can't just assume. The Constitution was clear. 2/3. They owe us that. Because, I mean, you said that maybe they understand democracy. I think they don't understand democracy because of the way that our selection itself of leaders, you know, it's not democratic. We don't have internal democracy in the parties, you know, but you may be right that these things are constructed deliberately to produce this kind of. I mean, look at what that senator guy from Ebonyi. Look at how he was talking to Obi Ezekwesili. Now, let's even forget about Obi Ezekwesili, that, you know, but how can a senator of the Federal Republic, because you are aggravated and annoyed in a public place, be speaking like that? Who are these people? I mean, and that's why I say that I don't think these people understand democracy. So all of these things dovetail together to say that, look, we need to have an activated citizenship. We can't just sit down. We have to organize. We have to organize just to establish a proper conduct of democracy. And it is doable because majority of Nigerians will not stand for this nonsense.
Do you think, because right now we also know that so talking about the Rivers issue was a bit tricky because it had become sub judice. We saw the governors of the PDP, you know, take the matter to the Supreme Court to determine, you know, if the legislature would not do what it ought to do, it's now at the courts. Do you think that's where it ought to be?
Well, it's a good move that the governor of PDP have done. You know, they probably will be able to save the day. But I'm surprised that Governor Fubara himself is sitting down praying.
What should he be doing?
I mean, if somebody did this to Bola Tinubu when he was governor of Lagos, do you know what he would be doing? I mean, he should be the first to go to court. He's still the governor. He still has a status. It's not being removed. It couldn't be removed that way. There is a questionable suspension. The first thing Governor Fubara ought to do, if he knew what he was doing, is to go to court. And is to make to tell his people that, look, what has happened in Rivers State is against the law. But he couldn't find the courage, and it's ridiculous. And it goes back to the process of how do we select our leaders. How can you make me, how can I be a governor and the president who was also elected is asking me to go away? Of course, I will go away so that there's no trouble, but I will go to the court and I will tell my people, this is what is happening. You elected me to do a job. The president has asked me to go away. It is wrong, and I'm going to fight it. That's the kind of way that you can build democracy. It's not by all these people carrying the bada all over the place. That's why I said they don't understand democracy. That's my view.
It's going to be, you know, tricky. But what do you expect to see in the coming days? You have said that citizens need to be more awake. Right now, on social media, it would seem that there is this challenge going on. Is it 30 days rant or 20 days rant? I'm not sure how long it's supposed to go on for. But you have citizens coming out to express just what they are going through under this economy. And we saw it start with a young youth corps member.
Right.
And it was controversial, but you know, we don't know if we're past that now. I sincerely want to believe that whatever it is that has happened, you know, that the matter has been resolved amicably, especially with the youth service corps involved in this. But a lot of citizens have now taken that to say, look, we need to express ourselves, you know, to let our leaders know just what it is that we're going through on a day-to-day basis, because it doesn't seem like they understand.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a good place to start, you know, the rant and the social media stuff, but it has to go beyond that, you know, and this is the challenge that we have. You know, I think we have a compromised elite. The elite in a society, they are the ones that are the quickest, the prompt, if you want to have a transformation, it is the elite that gets it done. But a lot of our elites is that it's like they are waiting their turn. You know, don't let me rock the boat. Maybe this thing is going to come to my, you know, my side. You know, it's the elite that needs to sit up in this country. And that's why one of the things that I've been saying is talking about elite consensus. We need to be able to say that, look, let's forget political differences.
What do we need to do to shake them up?
Well, you know, we have to shake ourselves up first. We have to shake ourselves up first. We have to be bold and courageous and say that this country belongs to all of us. And this is the constitution that we have, that our leaders have sworn to. They should live. But I mean, how can we accept that the National Assembly can just come out and tell us that when the constitution says 2/3, and nobody is telling us those figures? It's their duty to tell us. They owe us to tell us. And that is the place to start. We need to start calling out the National Assembly and say that you cannot behave this way. This is not the conduct that is expected of leaders.
Well, Laulu Akonde, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. He's a former presidential aide and speaking to us here in our Abuja studios. Ayo, didn't mean to ice you out of this conversation. Just happened how it happened. But this is where we leave the conversation this beautiful Thursday morning. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your morning. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
It will be very tempting to get into that conversation with Laulu and be able to recognize that you are there in the studio as well. But hey, it is what it is. I'm Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day.